Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, a Hey Mary Kay edition here on a Monday. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot. Questions from our Football Insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns. The blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. Send in your questions, all of that stuff. Let's get to it, Mary Kay. Of course, the big news today is Kevin Stefanski giving up play calling. He hands it over to Tommy Rees. You can imagine we got a bunch of questions about that. So let's start here, and let's just go with Tom Bays in Charlotte, North Carolina, with the most simple question with this whole transition. Hey, Mary Kay, what can Tommy Rees do differently to make the offense more productive?
Well, I think one of the things that he can do is stick with the running game a little bit more at times when it seems even a little bit hopeless. There were 2 losses in which they abandoned the run seemingly before they really needed to. And I know they're stacking the box, and I know that Quinshon Judkins was running into a bit of a brick wall. But I do think that there were times when they absolutely could stick with the run a little bit more. Even in New England, Jack Conklin after that one said, we gave up on the run. We need to run the ball more. Offensive linemen after both of those games uttered something similar about that. So I think that's number one. But then, of course, in order to be able to keep the run viable, they have to be able to enhance the passing game, and he's going to have to find a way to do it. It's incumbent upon him to find a way to make Dillon Gabriel feel comfortable enough to continue to throw the ball downfield and to feel confident enough at times to let it rip, to make sure he's seeing what's there and taking what is there. And that's not going to be easy. That's all easier said than done. But I think it will be easier with Cedric Tillman in the number 2 spot than Isaiah Bond, because he's got more experience. He's been more productive in that role, and he's a much bigger bodied receiver. So when you're throwing the ball downfield and you're throwing it into the red zone, throwing it into the end zone, I think it's going to really help to have Cedric Tillman back. And he's hungry. He's ready to go. He's coming back from a hamstring injury. That should also take some heat away from Jerry Jeudy, a little pressure off Jerry. Jerry has pressed. Jerry has tried too hard at times to make a play when the ball should be right there and caught in his hands, and he's not making the play because he's looking upfield, trying to make something big happen. So he needs to just also take what is there and to settle within himself and not try to do too much. Everybody just has to do their job. And if they all do that, I think there is enough talent on this offense to produce far more than they have been producing to this point. They have Harold Fannin can do a nice job. There's more to David Njoku than there has been so far. They brought back Brendan Bates, and I've talked about this before. Maybe we'll see a little bit more 13 personnel. Maybe we'll see a heavier offense if need be. So I think you'll see some of those kinds of things. And once again, I was talking to Harold Fannin about this today. Tommy Rees was the tight ends coach last year. So maybe there will be a little bit more in store for the tight ends as they move forward with Tommy as the play caller.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see sort of how Tommy does approach that run game and if he is a little more willing to stick with it. I think that's the big thing. I think a lot of that other stuff is just kind of guys stepping up. And obviously that starts with your quarterback. You've got to get him, like you were saying, more comfortable. Set will help. He isn't having an amazing year, but nobody's having an amazing year. He had 52 yards in week 1 and then, a few quiet weeks after that. But still, he did have a touchdown in week 2 against Baltimore. He's at, let me see here, doing quick math, 11. He's got 11 catches this year. But again, this is all sort of in the context of what this offense has been. Like the passing game just hasn't been good enough when you've got Isaiah Bond and Malachi Corley, Gage Larvidan. Having said that kind of puts all the dominoes back in place. So now maybe you can use Isaiah a little bit differently and you can use these other guys a little bit differently in that receiving core. It just makes that all a little bit easier. And maybe Dillon will trust throwing the ball to Ced Tillman, just a big-bodied guy downfields. I don't know that Ced Tillman comes back and makes this like the greatest show on turf, but like anything helps right now, and Ced Tillman is going to help this offense.
Well, at this point, he is a significant upgrade over Isaiah Bond, who is a rookie just learning the game and thrust into a position that might not be the best thing in the world for him. If you remember back with Elijah Moore, Elijah had to be playing that role last year, and it didn't always go that well. You can't necessarily take a smaller guy like that all the time and have him succeed in some of those contested situations. You can't just throw the ball up and expect him to go up and get it against some of these DBs, whereas you can do that a little bit with a bigger bodied guy like Cedric Tillman. So I think it's the height and the size that has been sorely, sorely missed. So I think that's going to help. And then it does give them three kind of taller receivers now, including the tight ends, and four if you include Brennan Bates in there. So it gives them a little bit more height going forward. And I think that's going to help them immensely. And Tillman's fast too. I mean, he's a good downfield threat. So I think it's really going to help. I think they have really, really missed him. Like you said, it's not going to make them the greatest show on turf, but it's going to put people back where they belong, right? Isaiah Bond can come in and be a good role player as the third wideout. But thrusting him into the number 2 role and him being the deep threat guy all the time, it just wasn't working. Last game, he was targeted 4 times, mostly downfield, and it was 0 for 4. And one of those times the ball was picked off. So that hasn't been working. But if he takes that step back, then I think he will perform a whole lot better in the role that he is given this Sunday.
Okay, a couple more play caller questions. This comes from Christian in Hudson. Hey, Mary Kay, doesn't Kevin Stefanski's abdication of his play calling duties amount to a reshuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic, given the overall lack of talent at wide receiver and the struggles at quarterback?
Well, I understand that line of thinking, and sometimes it does feel a little bit like that, but they had to do something, okay? They had to do something. And sometimes it's even just for appearances. You have to show that you're willing to try something to shake it up and to make sure that you can send a message to the rest of the football team that even though Kevin Stefanski might not want to give up play calling, he's doing it for the good of the football team. And making a sacrifice like that, I think that's going to go a long way towards helping some of these defensive players who needed some tangible evidence that these guys are willing to do whatever it takes. So I think that I think from that standpoint, it's going to help. You can go to them and say, hey, we're trying something new. It might not work. It might not work. I think that, like I said, other things might make more of an impact, like having said back and maybe going to some 13 personnel or 3 tight end sets if they have to do that. That might work. Maybe they do some different things in the running game to get that thing going and cranked up at times when you do have a stacked box. And look, with Malachi Corley, the few times that he has run the ball, he's made good yards. And you can't go to that well very often because people are going to start to be ready for it. But a couple of jet sweeps here and there, some end arounds to try to get the ground game going, a little bit of Jerome Ford mixed in occasionally, maybe some Dylan Sampson, although with Dillon, I almost think that he might be best served just getting out on some of those short flat passes and getting him out in space a little bit, and then he can get the run after catch. But, there are different little creative things that they can do and that they have to do to get that ground game going when it can't just always be Quinshon Judkins trying to run into a brick wall.
So let's continue down this road with Kevin making this decision. This comes from the 330 area code. Hey, Mary Kay, if Kevin Stefanski has to turn over play calling duties 2 years in a row, this can't be a good look for him, right?
Well, we'll find out as time goes along. I don't think that that it's necessarily an indictment on Kevin because in each of these 2 years, they've had major quarterback issues. They haven't had the starting quarterback they thought they were going to have, and they find themselves getting down into their depth at quarterback, and then he's expected to be this amazing play caller when you have a really young quarterback, a really young offense, and some other deficiencies on your offensive football team. So I'm sorry, I have a cat who is meowing in the background. Sorry about that.
It adds a little flavor to the pod.
So sometimes it does feel like a little bit of desperation, and it didn't work last year. They went 2-8 down the stretch after Ken Dorsey became the play caller. So it certainly didn't work for them last year, but they needed to try something. And I think that Kevin Stefanski will be a much better play caller when he has the starting quarterback that he really wants.
I think this is a little different than last year too, just because the Dorsey Stefanski marriage always seemed just a little bit off, just in terms of how they both like to do things. Ken Dorsey is a little more of the spread, Coach Josh Allen, all of that. And he was brought in to sort of see if he could resuscitate Deshaun Watson's career. Tommy is kind of Kevin's handpicked guy. I think they both kind of see things the same. They both kind of look at things the same. He's obviously a young, they're hoping a young up and coming guy. But I do think it's fair if people are looking at this and saying, you have this offensive head coach who's given up play calling 2 years in a row. You're going into an off season where you're going to have to make some quarterback decisions and maybe draft your quarterback of the future. You want to make sure that you have all the right pieces in place, which includes, your offensive head coach, how he wants to approach play calling, how he wants to develop that quarterback. This is a very important offseason in those regards. So I think it's fair to say, okay, this is 2 years in a row that he's had to do this. But I do think, we can also acknowledge this feels different than maybe last year when him and Ken Dorsey just never felt like a great mix.
No, they were philosophically misaligned, I would say. So I think that Kevin and Tommy are more on the same page. But I did ask Kevin today, do you think he's going to have the confidence to put his own stamp on this offense? And Kevin said, without a doubt. So he'll give him the leeway that he needs to run his own game. And we'll have to see how that goes and what the changes look like. But I do think that if, let's say, Kevin, they go out and they draft, I don't know, Lenora Sellers. I'm just throwing that out there. Let's say they draft their quarterback of the future next year. I do think that Kevin should probably take back play calling next year, depending on what happens the rest of this year and what happens with Tommy and all those kinds of things. I do think that he deserves a chance to call the plays when he's got the quarterback that he wants, because I think he can probably end up being a really, really good play caller. And I think he is a good play caller. But the conditions just haven't been conducive to good offense, good quarterbacking. And I think he deserves a chance to see what he can do under those kind of conditions.
Right. And I think too, as they kind of navigate this, one of the interesting things that I forget where I heard this, but it was kind of going around a few weeks ago that now I don't think the Browns are going to have the number one overall pick, but I guess the last 4 number one quarterbacks, their coach has been fired either during or after their rookie season. They might have all been during their rookie season, which is that's one thing you want to avoid in this process, especially if you're going with a young quarterback. You'd really like to have that guy in place. Now you're hoping that's Kevin Stefanski, but that's just one of the decisions that they have to make. If they are going to go for a young quarterback, a Lenora Sellers or a Ty Simpson, whoever it is in this draft, whoever they kind of decide on, they've got to make sure they have the right guy in place, because some guys can overcome it. Drake May doesn't seem to have fazed him that his head coach got fired after his first season and now he's got a new guy. But it can be, well, I guess he wasn't a number one overall pick, so he doesn't count. But really, for any young quarterback, having that guy in place from the start, I think is a big piece of this. So maybe that's part of this too, is finding out, like, moving forward, do they want it to be Kevin and Tommy together? Do they still want Kevin to be the play caller? How do they want this to look as they move into the offseason where they're going to have to make some big quarterback decisions?
Right. And there's one way to find out if your offense might function better with a different spin on the play calling is to try somebody else at the task. Because I've been saying this and I get pushback on it, just even in my own household. I think there's some talent on this offense, and I think the best can still be brought out in it. Now, that might require better quarterback play. You might not be able to bring the best out of Jerry Jeudy without better quarterback play. You might not get more out of David Njoku without better quarterback play, right? Some of these other guys too, same thing. You might need that. But it's also what came first, the chicken or the egg. So it's now incumbent upon Tommy Rees to somehow, some way, bring out the talent that is already on this offense, because I feel like there is more talent than what they've been showing so far. And they have to figure out a way to use it properly and to maximize it. Now, I will say this. They've been through the gauntlet of their schedule already. They bore the brunt of their 2025 schedule in the first 8 games of the season. They had all those road games. They didn't win any of them. And now they've got 5 out of their last 9 at home. They have the easiest schedule the rest of the way. So I think it's going to be easier to look a little bit better. And sometimes there's a method to Kevin Stefanski's madness when it comes to this sort of thing. Maybe he wanted to take the fall for the first 8 games of the season so that he's not throwing his young, new first-year offensive coordinator under the bus in those grueling first 4 games where you had 3 straight road games, including 1 in London. You're playing those really difficult playoff NFC North teams, and you've got a fledgling offense with a bunch of rookies on it. Maybe he wanted to take that all upon himself and give Tommy the easier part of the schedule. I wouldn't be surprised if that had something to do with it. Let him take the fall because he knows that his job is secure, and don't put that on Tommy. Let him ease his way into it by calling plays against the 1-7 Jets and against the 1-7 Titans and against, now the Ravens are back at it with Lamar back in the saddle and all those kinds of things. But you've got the Raiders coming up. Again, some of these are road games, not going to be super easy, but you have an easier rest of the way than you had to this point. And maybe there's a method to the madness.
Okay, so the other part of this is, of course, the quarterback discussion. And so we'll go to this question from Sam in Biloxi. Now, we'll note before we ask this question that Shedeur Sanders was not at practice on Monday, still dealing with that back issue that kept him out of the Patriots game. So we're monitoring that as we go along. But Sam in Biloxi, hey, Mary Kay, what's the real story behind Shedeur Sanders not playing? We see a ton on social media. What do we believe? And what do the Browns have to lose in throwing him out there?
Well, I'll tell you what, I really don't think that there is any gamesmanship going on with Shedeur Sanders' back injury right now. The Browns are not foolish enough to make something like this up or fudge it in any way. If Shedeur Sanders is out with tightness in his back, then he's got tightness in his back. And if he missed practice again today with that back injury, then that is what is going on there. And we watched him work out before that game. I didn't see him really throw with much velocity, and I didn't see him throw very many deep balls. Did you? I mean, it didn't look like he was letting it rip.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch every throw, but I didn't see anything that made me believe, like, okay, yeah, this guy's ready to go.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's anything more to this than the fact that you have a rookie quarterback with some back tightness. And maybe by Wednesday, he'll be absolutely fine. And he will be QB2 again in New York. But in my opinion, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have Bailey Zappi as your backup for a few weeks, because in the event that you would need to spell Dillon, give him a break, I think Bailey would be the better person to go in cold like that, coming off the bench, and just get thrown into a situation. He's used to that. He's done it before. Shedeur's never had to do that. I don't know if you want his first action to be one play away, coming off the bench, get thrown in against a defense that's ready to just disguise its looks and confuse you and sack the heck out of you. So I just don't know if that's the right situation for him right now. So if he has to sit out another game, I actually think it could be beneficial for everybody involved. Let him not have that risky type of situation for him.
Yeah, and look, it's obviously easy to sit here and cook up conspiracy theories and, throw things out as to why they're not doing something. And they don't help their cause, obviously, because they don't ever communicate anything. And we didn't hear from the GM last week, and Kevin Stefanski never says anything in his press conferences. So in a lot of ways, they do this to themselves by just being so stubborn about giving us any information at all about what they're thinking. But I mean, maybe it really is just as simple as like Dillon Gabriel's made 4 starts. He was the higher of the 2 picks. They want to see what they have in him. He's coming off the bye week now. Let's see how this looks. And maybe they just aren't ready to hand things over to Shedeur Sanders. Maybe they still need to see more from him behind the scenes, even if he has made a lot of progress. Has he made enough progress to be a starting quarterback in the league? Maybe they don't believe that. I think the easiest answer is probably that. And it's fun to throw out conspiracy theories and fun to do that on social media and talk about that stuff. But honestly, I think usually the answer is just kind of the simplest thing that's right in front of our faces. And I feel like that's kind of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really do think that it's twofold. It's that they want to get a longer look at Dillon Gabriel, as we've been saying. They want to look at more of him. 4 games isn't enough. And then the flip side of the coin is the fact that Shedeur probably really isn't 100% ready yet to go in there and to be able to start games yet. He's still learning. If you're going from English to Mandarin, this is just a very short time frame to having learned an entirely new language. So maybe he's not quite there yet. And think about this. There are 9 games left. If you turned it over to him now, that is a long way to go. A long way to go if that's not going to work out. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to go to Bailey Zappi? Are you going to go back to Dillon Gabriel? Are you going to maybe go to Deshaun Watson? I mean, I just don't think they're ready to get to that point yet. Now, yes, I'm sure they want to see Shedeur Sanders start some games this year. We've heard that come out of the owner's mouth. And even though it's not supposed to be his decision and he's not supposed to have any say in that kind of matter, that's Kevin Stefanski's jurisdiction. If there is an organizational desire to see your rookie quarterback so you can help make decisions on the 2026 draft, then that's going to happen at some point. Doesn't necessarily have to happen with 9 games left, though. Maybe 3 games to go, maybe even 4. But 9, I think, is too many. The unfortunate part about it is that Dillon hasn't really played well enough yet to warrant a really long leash or a bunch more starts. And he's got to pick it up. And easier said than done. We saw what happened to Joe Flacco when he went to Cincinnati and starts throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, right? I mean, we see what's going on down there. He's back to averaging 300 some yards per game, threw for over 400 yesterday. So we know the deal. We know what's happening. But Dillon is still going to have to show more than what he's shown so far. There are plays to be made. He has been off on some of his throws. He has been rushed into some throws. He's gotten hit during or after the throw, and that doesn't make it easy to know exactly where you're going with the ball. But he has to pick up his performance just like everybody around him does. And I think that in a perfect world, they would like to see probably at least 3 or 4 more starts from him. I don't know if he can last that long.
Yeah, I think over these next few weeks, that heat's going to get turned up if they somehow go to New York. And the Jets are actually favored in this game. If they somehow go to New York and they lose this game Sunday, that turns up the heat if the offense looks bad. And then you come home and you've got to play a Ravens team that blew you out in week 2 and is starting to get healthy. And I don't know if their defense is ever going to look like it has the last couple years, but that's still a better team than what you're going to face against some of these other games. Like that heat starts to get turned up a little bit, and then the Browns might just kind of have their hands forced to take a look at Shedeur, because to your point, you want to have at least some idea of what these two guys are. I don't know that they're going to have a firm answer one way or another, but if you can just go into the offseason thinking, oh, you know what? Maybe there is something there with Shedeur Sanders. Like maybe we do want Shedeur to compete for this job again next year. Maybe we do want Dillon Gabriel to compete for this job again next year. Maybe we want to use those 2 first-round picks in a different way. It can change your whole offseason strategy if you get a positive answer on one of these 2 guys.
Right. And there's going to come a point where you're not playing for the playoffs anymore. And that point is probably going to come fairly soon. Right? I mean, even though the AFC North is topsy-turvy this year and not anywhere near as good as everyone thought it was going to be, right now, they still can't say there's absolutely no shot. They can't say that yet. Now, the Steelers made it a lot harder on them yesterday by winning, but you can't completely bury the Browns just yet. It's coming close, but not just yet. But there will come a point where you're not playing for anything. And then it's like, okay, now let's see what Shedeur has or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's unfortunate that they're at this point already. It shouldn't be this way. And I still feel in my heart of hearts, even at this very moment in time, if they had another veteran, good quarterback plugged right into this football team, that it would be a much better offense. I think it would be a much better offense. Now, it couldn't be somebody that's going to be turning the ball over like Jameis did last year and like Joe Flacco was doing here this year, which of course he's not doing that very much in Cincinnati. But if you had a good game manager that could hold down the fort for you, I think that they would look a lot better than they do right now. That person's not coming in to save the Cleveland Browns. I know that. Unless, of course, they give Deshaun Watson a chance at some point, which could happen, crazy as it sounds. But just in terms of like a trade or something like that, they're not getting another quarterback.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that name because we did get a question about Deshaun Watson, and I want to ask it here. So this comes from Mike Parker in Chester, Maryland. Hey, Mary Kay, what's the downside in accelerating Deshaun Watson's return? The Browns owe him guaranteed money regardless of his playing status. Is it strictly for insurance purposes? If not, I'm puzzled. Although he isn't the player they anticipated, I can't imagine he would be worse than what we've seen from Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it. Once again, I don't know that there are very many quarterbacks that are going to look that great with this particular offense right now because you don't have, unless Jerry somehow wakes up and becomes the Jerry of yesteryear of last season, then then it would probably be hard for Deshaun Watson to come in rusty and cold this season and make this look a bunch better. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe he can. I think he feels like he can. I mean, from people that I've talked to, he feels like he can come in and be successful with this football team. So I don't know if he'll get that chance. I have no idea if he'll get that chance. He's like he who shall not be named. Nobody wants to talk about him. Nobody wants to answer a question about him. And we really don't know. We don't even know when they are going to activate him or open his 21-day practice window. I will say that just so people understand, it can happen at any time. There is no deadline whereby, they have to have this done by November 24th or something like that. They can open the practice window at any time, and it's a 21-day window in which they can activate him at any point. And if they don't, then he remains on reserve PUP for the rest of the season. He may never see the field this season. He may not. But if they go with a little bit of Dillon, a little bit of Shedeur, it's not working out, there's a couple games left, why not? If he's 100% cleared and healthy, I would do it. I'm curious to see if he's got anything left in the tank. We know he thinks he does.
Yeah, and I don't know how tradable he is because of that contract, but if it does get to that point and you throw him out there for 3 games and he looks, this is a big ask for a guy who just had an Achilles repair done in January, but if he looks a little bit like Deshaun Watson again, does that increase his trade value a little bit? And does that help you maybe move on from that contract a little bit quick? There is some upside there beyond just, hey, could he be the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns? I don't know if that would go over well with this fan base, but could we put him out there to showcase him a little bit and see if maybe somebody would take, the Miami Dolphins are looking for a quarterback and they were interested in Deshaun years ago when he was still with Houston. So I don't know, maybe obviously things have changed in that organization since then, but maybe there's some way, there could be some benefit beyond just even seeing him play. There could be some benefit to putting him on the field and showing this guy still has something left maybe.
Right. I mean, you never really know. The Browns, the only thing that they ever say about Deshaun is no decisions to be made, nothing to talk about until he is cleared medically. And so that is the whole key. He has not passed those medical exams yet, and that has to happen before they open that practice window. He's going through those rechecks now, maybe even this week, next week, not really sure. But I've been told that he is going through some medical rechecks. And once he clears, then they can make some decisions. But until then, they won't even entertain it.
Yeah, we don't get much from them when Deshaun's name comes up. Real quick, I do want to touch on this because obviously the trade deadline is on Tuesday. We kind of went quarterback heavy and offense heavy here. Who knows? By the time people hear this, maybe some trade things could have changed, and we'll all get back together after the trade deadline on Tuesday. But do you expect this team to do anything significant between now and 4 p.m. on Tuesday? And we're recording this. It's about 6 o'clock. It's almost 6 o'clock here on Monday.
I think they would like to try to acquire a couple of players, maybe not blockbuster names, but a couple of role players that can help them not just for the rest of this year, but for a couple of years down the road, a Tyson Campbell type of guy. And maybe not even that caliber because he's a good starting cornerback. I don't know if they're going to aim that high, but I know that they would like to trade for a couple of guys. And there might be teams that come calling for some of their guys, and maybe they'll get willing. They haven't been actively necessarily shopping those guys. We've talked about this, the David Njokus and the Wyatt Tellers and those guys. But if somebody needs one of those guys and is willing to make you an offer that you cannot refuse, then anything can happen. Anything can happen before the trade deadline. So, yes, I do think that at least one or two deals will happen by tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I don't know what positions they're targeting. I would think if they were smart, they would be looking for an offensive lineman because they need to address that position. So that's something that if I were them, I would be looking for. I would also be looking for a wide receiver. I don't have any evidence or indication whatsoever that they would be doing that themselves. It's something I would do. I don't think they're doing it. I'm trying to think of what other positions they might need. I mean,
I think those are two. I mean, young O-line, young receiver that you have control over, because we know that O-line, I mean, you could be, they'll probably end up bringing back a couple of those guys. Wyatt today was talking about wanting to retire a Brown. Some of that might be cost dependent. I don't know what Ethan Posick is going to demand on the open market, but that you're looking at remaking. You're probably remaking 60% of that offensive line, assuming Joel retires. If Joel wants to come back, they'll let him come back, but because he's playing really well still. But I think that's we've talked about receiver, but that's kind of a sneaky one too. If you can get a young guard or even a young tackle or somebody like that you can get in your building and get in your system, I think that would be a smart move.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't want to add a receiver. They keep saying they really like the talent and they like the guys that they have. So they must think that once the quarterback play elevates, then the receivers are going to look better. That must be the line of thinking, because I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what happens when when Ced comes back. It's odd. They seem to have so much faith in their receiving core, and they really only have 2 touchdown catches by their receivers this season, and both of those were by Cedric Tillman. And it's just a receiving core that it's not flourishing right now. And I'm sure, once again, with better quarterback play, the receivers would be playing better, but maybe the quarterbacks would be playing better with better receivers. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? We don't know. I would add a receiver. And if I could have found a quarterback somewhere out on the street that wanted to come in here and win some games for the Cleveland Browns, I would have done that too.
You're just remaking the entire roster here on the fly. Whatever. Yeah. Let's have some fun here on a Tuesday trade deadline day.
Why not?
All right. We're going to wrap it up there on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Like I said, we'll get back together after the trade deadline and talk about whatever did or didn't happen on Tuesday. Get subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so that hits your feed as soon as we hit publish on that. Find our socials, Orange and Brown Talk on Instagram and Orange Brown Talk on Twitter. And of course, find our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.